Hello there, and welcome to this wine tasting. Today, we're going to be tasting a Sauvignon Blanc. I apologise that the label is flipped here, but we've got a Journey's End Sauvignon Blanc, 2020, I believe, so nice and fresh. Most recent vintage. We're going to do it in reverse this time. So instead of learning about the wine and learning about the winery and the grape, we're going to taste and then do the talking and thinking later. Because I think it's important that you taste wine blind in a way, so you're not influenced by your preconceived notion of a bottle or a winery or a grape or etc. etc. There's certain characteristics of Sauvignon Blanc which I know will probably be present, but if I look into the winery, if I look into the wine, I might start making judgments, etc., etc., about what the wine will taste like. So we're going in with little to no knowledge about the wine itself. That is to say, I know about Sauvignon Blanc, and in fact I do know the winery, Journey's End. I know that they do good stuff at Journey's End. This is a South African Sauvignon Blanc. But just looking at the colour, very pale. This is what you want. Pretty much all white wines, unless they have age or sort of are aged in oak or other things. If they've got skin contact, pretty much all white wines, in most cases, are going to be a clear, pale lemon colour. So we have a very pale colour here. Okay, so Sauvignon Blanc is an aromatic grape. And this is quite an aromatic wine. Starting off, the aromas are very fresh, very citrus, although they're quite pronounced, they're quite sort of light, sweet aromas. So floral aromas, fruit aromas. Quite typical of many white wines are citrus aromas, particularly lemon and lime, and I would say they're both here to some degree, as well as orange. So orange peel, green apple as well, again is a very common white wine aroma, and I would say it's present here. Maybe pear as well, but so far it's a nice, fresh, crisp aroma with citrus, lemon, apple, pear. So far, very typical. Is there a slight minerality? Is in my mind, is there a slight kind of flintiness or kind of not saltiness, but kind of along those lines? I wouldn't say so. It's more of a like sometimes aromas kind of grip you in a way. I think this is more of a sourness, but a minerality might kind of almost grip your nose in a way as well. So I think it's just a nice sourness there on the nose, which follows along obviously from citrus notes. Floral, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm bad at floral aromas because I don't go around smelling flowers particularly. And I wouldn't be able to blind smell a flower. But I would say there are some floral aromas here. You sometimes get vegetal notes as well in Sauvignon Blanc. Typically comes from cooler climates. So you might see asparagus or green pepper. Grassy notes as well. That tends to come from slightly more complex Sauvignon Blanc grown in cooler regions. South Africa, I think, is going to be generally producing a warmer climate Sauvignon Blanc that is just quite punchy, quite aromatic. Hopefully they preserve that acidity. Sauvignon Blanc generally preserves its acidity very well, and usually is a high acidity wine. So, as this is quite an affordable wine, what I've smelled on the nose there, what I've got on the nose is pretty typical, pretty much exactly what I expected, and I'm not sure if it will reveal anything else particularly. I don't think there's much more for it to give away, and that is to say, it's not going to have, it's likely not to have any oak aging, so it's not going to have any secondary aromas. It's not aged, as we know, and the fruit kind of operates in kind of tiers in a way. And because you've got that citrus aroma and that green apple aroma, you're kind of unlikely, unless it's got slightly more kind of complexity, to branch out into other flavours. So it's slightly less likely to become more tropical. It's slightly less likely to become more vegetal. It's just kind of pretty plain in a way. And this is kind of how, a huge majority of white wine is produced in the worldwide. It's, quote unquote, table wine in a way. That's probably putting it harshly, depending on how you sort of connotate or connotations you have with table wine. But relatively neutral flavour. In normal words, that's plain. Okay, so you're probably wondering, this was a tasting, why hasn't he tasted it yet? Well, that's usually because you can pretty much discern what you're going to taste through the aroma. And as we know, if you watched a couple of my other videos, you will know that taste very much relies on retronasal olfaction, bit of a tongue twister. That's when the aromas basically go from your kind of, this kind of cavity back here. I'm not sure of the exact kind of collective term for it, but they kind of go that way, back out your nose rather than in that way. Anyway, we've done a lot of talking, and we're going to do much more talking about this wine in particular and Sauvignon Blanc in general. But here we go for the taste. So this wine is high acidity, I would say. Now, if you're unfamiliar with wine tasting and the kind of technicality or the terminology, I should say, behind wine, acidity is neither a good or bad thing. If it has high acidity or low acidity, that in and of itself does not tell you whether a wine is good. But typically wines are made with high acidity, and that is for a couple of reasons. Number one, that is what wine tradition lends itself to. So wine tradition is based on gastronomic wines, so wines that go with food, and this is kind of born out of the old world, France and kind of other countries as well. Italy as well produces very, very acidic wines. But that isn't a good or bad thing. That is just there's just one quality of wine that is very, very important in evaluating it. And Sauvignon Blanc happens to be a high acidity grape, and they've preserved that acidity in the wine. So there we are, high acidity, we got that. If you're interested in tasting wine yourself, a little kind of trick for ascertaining acidity in a wine. I mean, it tends to be quite second nature to us to taste acidity, but tartness or sourness, etc., and you kind of do feel it in your mouth. But after you've swallowed a wine or spat out a wine, depending on how much you salivate, that kind of gives you a clue as to the amount of acidity. So if a wine is very acidic, then once you swallow the wine, your mouth will salivate, and that is why high acidity wine tends to be very associated with kind of appetizing wine, so an aperitif. So for example, champagne, sparkling wine tends to be very high acidity to stimulate your appetite and make you want to eat more as well, especially if you're running a restaurant or kind of hosting and that sort of thing. So high acidity. Now, why haven't I talked much about the flavour? Because honestly, there isn't much flavour in this wine. It is very, very neutral. You have those citrus flavours that go along with that acidity, lemon, lime, apple, pear. But by and large, that is all I could really taste. Minerality, there might be a tiny bit of minerality there, just kind of cutting through the acidity. I'd probably say this is a medium-bodied wine, but that's probably up for debate. I will just taste it again and see what I think. So I think this wine actually does have quite a nice mouth feel, and I've got absolutely no problem with this wine at all. In fact, I think the flavour is, although it's not that complex, it's not that interesting, and it's not sort of compelling really in any way. That sounds scathing. But there's no off flavours at all. An off flavour is something that you might, that could be a fault, but generally when I say an off flavour, it's just something that isn't as appealing to you, or is unexpected in the wine, or a lot of times off flavours aren't easy to categorise, because wine evaluation generally doesn't focus on wine that doesn't taste very good, if you see what I mean. So I wouldn't really be able to tell you what an off flavour would be, and it's kind of up to your own palate as well. But some poorly produced wine will just have weird flavours and atypical flavours. But this is very, very typical. Quite pleasing actually on the palate, and as I say, as an aperitif, I think it's very suitable. And Sauvignon Blanc is a perfect grape because it fits into a nice box, and the box of high acidity, of relative neutrality in flavour. You can get very, very complex, very, very interesting Sauvignon Blanc. And it's grown very widely, very, very widely. In fact, it's probably the most widely one of the most widely grown grapes, if not the most. There's a few contenders for the most widely grown, but it's kind of just a crowd pleaser, really. It's hard to go wrong with Sauvignon Blanc. I think the acidity sometimes can put people off if they don't like, really, really acidic wines. But generally speaking, affordable wine tends to be neutral with good acidity, medium to high acidity. So this is kind of what people are going to expect from wine. So there it is. I mean, there's kind of not too much more to say about it, really. Other than it fills a purpose. I mean, I can say that it's not interesting, but it does fill a purpose, and I think it's a well-made wine, and it does what you want it to do. So what else? what else could you say? It didn't set out to be overly complex, and it isn't. So there we go. I'm going to go for one more taste. But honestly, I think I'm looking for something that isn't there. I think if I had to sum up my view on wine and wine tasting, it's that the only thing you can ask of a bottle of wine is for it to show its varietal character, to show kind of what it actually is, and try and show where it's come from. And I think it would be incredibly difficult to place this wine in the world because it's so neutral. But it's a Sauvignon Blanc, and it does exactly what Sauvignon Blanc does. So that's all you can really expect from tasting wine. And I'm satisfied. I think I've given a pretty decent sort of evaluation of this wine. This wine was £7, reduced actually as well. And that might be more, that might in fact be more than what people are willing to spend on wine. And it also might be less what you might like to spend on wine. I think for £7, because it's not particularly interesting, I don't know, it's really difficult to evaluate. But I'd be perfectly happy drinking this with a meal, as an aperitif, whatever. I think it fits in the box, it ticks the box. And we will come back later and talk about Sauvignon Blanc, talk about Journey's End, talk about South African Sauvignon Blanc, and probably just general wine stuff. So there we go. This has been, in fact, I didn't even say the name of the wine. This has been Identity Sauvignon Blanc from Journey's End, and I'd say, yeah, not bad, pretty good. Okay, can't complain. But there we are. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again later.